Welcome to episode 2 of the first season of the Gem Club podcast. I'm your host, Adam Lehman. On today's episode, I have a very special guest, but before I introduce that guest to you, I wanted to thank those of you who had sent feedback and comments and reactions to the first episode, because that really fueled me and our team and our producer and everybody who's working on this podcast. There was something really special about getting to hear what you all think about an episode and which parts of it resonate with you. I get to pass a little bit of that information along to our guests to let them know that they are making a difference and inspiring us and all of those things. It's one thing for me to say it, but it's another thing for strangers on the internet who are listening to all of this say it. Thank you very much. If you, in this episode or any other episodes of the Gem Club podcast that you listen to, if you find yourself feeling inspired or really resonating with an episode, go ahead and hop on to social media and send a direct message to the Gem Club on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Just let us know what you think. It doesn't have to be well articulated. It doesn't have to be something that gets shared publicly. We pass some of that information anonymously back to the guests to just let them know which parts of their story people found inspiring. You all know how big of a deal that is. It's a big deal to us, so thank you for being part of that conversation. And now I want to introduce today's guests. Bobby Jocson is a videographer in Columbus, Ohio. The reason I wanted to have him on is I was listening to him talk about where his video business is now, and because of my relationship with Bobby's my brother-in-law. Because of my relationship with Bobby, I've gotten to see him progress through his career. I've gotten to watch him learn about gear and process and editing and teach himself and really build his business and his practice and his craft from the ground up. I've really appreciated that approach because so many of our listeners and people who hang out around the Gem Club are self-taught, working in industries that weren't necessarily what they were trained in. It's not what they went to school for. It's not something that their parents gave them from a young age. And so in today's episode, as you're listening to Bobby, if you're one of those people who are working or pursuing a business in something that you weren't trained in, I think you'll feel pretty inspired. I think you'll feel a real resonance with his story because the way he talks about his journey, the things he's learned, the things he watches clients do a great job of, and the advice that he sees given all the time that maybe we shouldn't all listen to. The way he talks about those things is very relatable if you are like him and you're doing work that isn't something that you went to school for. As we jump into today's episode, just listen for that. If you know somebody who is doing something that they didn't go to school for and might feel a little bit of imposter syndrome, share this episode with them. Let them listen to it. This is a really useful story for them and for all of us who are doing work that we don't have a degree in and isn't what we went to school for. We're self-taught. Without getting into it any further, here's Bobby Jocson. Here we go. Bobby, welcome to the Gem Club podcast. I've been excited to get to interview you for a long time. You have been doing a lot of different work in the space of video creation. We even collaborate on share some clients. We've worked on some things before together. Tell the people a little bit about your video career and the type of things you've been shooting, what kind of clients you're working with, or what type of businesses or brands you've done work with.
Yeah, I've been doing paid video work for a little over 3 years now, and I started off video in a very unorthodox way, probably not a lot of the way that most people get into it.
What was that?
So I've always been interested in video and interested in like the concept of being able to create a story, but I've never been that interested in creating like a movie or a film or anything like that. But even like when we were little, right, Allie and I would make funny videos, and then Olivia, my little sister, and we would make funny videos. But then once I would say that I was 20 years old, I got a GoPro. And we actually got a GoPro for a t-shirt company that me and my buddy started, and we were like, we should start shooting some video. We should almost like vlog style. This is when like vlogging was starting to get really big. And so I just started making videos on the GoPro. I don't think any of the videos ever touched the public, but I had so much fun making those videos. And it was really more just like a personal interest. So then it got into, once I started dating my now wife, we started making videos on vacations. Yeah. And it was just like a fun thing. And it was less about me posting it and showing people. And it was more about the feeling of what I got when I would create an edit and something would match up perfectly. And it was just like pure ecstasy. So I kind of got hooked on that. So then once I started doing that, I tried to start another business, which also required me to start doing more video. So I finally bought my first actual mirrorless camera. And then people started noticing the videos, and I got hired by my first client for dirt cheap. But I really enjoyed it, and I thought, like, yeah, I've made it. And it kind of just went off from there. I always told myself early on that I was never going to try to chase clients.
Yeah.
I was just like, if people like my work, people will hire me.
No, it's cool. I didn't even really, when I wanted you to be on here, I was listening to you talk about your video business, and I was like, this is perfect for the Gem Club podcast. The type of people who listen to this will find a lot of inspiration in your story. And I hadn't thought about even all the way back to the t-shirt company and the GoPro, because I remember all of that stuff, but I didn't connect those dots. I've watched, like, I've probably seen more of the videos that you don't post than, you know, what's on your Instagram account. But tell me about, like, your style or aesthetic approach that, you know, you mentioned it's not, you never were like, I want to make a video or like a documentary or this like long narrative thing. It was always like something else. Like, talk about that a little bit. Where'd that come from, or what do you try to accomplish?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to, you know, I like telling a story, and I like telling a story actually without audio in terms of like somebody talking and explaining like what's going on, like you would see in like a film or a documentary. And I think that's why I'm so attracted to videos, because you can create such a feeling just based off of, you know, the visuals, the music, the foley, the sound effects that you can put into that. And I think that's kind of what motivated me to get more into video, and just being able to take like 5 clips, sequence them together, and I could change the whole entire feeling of that video based off of the music, sound effects, the edit, the cuts and stuff like that. And I think that's what's so interesting. And I feel like, you know, there was such a long time where every time I did a video and it would turn out, you know, well, I'd be like, this is a fluke. Like, I'm never going to be able to create a video like this ever again.
Yeah.
And I always used to tell Cheyenne, my wife, that, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to top this. You know, it always felt like it just kind of fell into place. So I felt for a while that I was just faking it. Like, man, like, because sometimes I would throw clips up onto the timeline and the music would match up like perfectly, you know. And I'd be like, I probably would have never found that if I hadn't have put that in there. But going back to like where my style comes from, when I really started getting into video, I used to watch Casey Neistat every single day. And his style, especially on his vlogs, were really interesting because he wasn't trying to be fancy with it. He didn't care about exposure. Like, everything was just him telling a story through the visuals, but the quality of the visuals didn't really matter to him, you know. And he always talked about, like, the equipment doesn't matter to him.
Yeah.
And I think that was really interesting to me, and it made me feel better at a time when I didn't have the equipment to be like, I can still make cool things.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a Sam Colder, like, amazing video with drone shots and perfect exposure, and you're using red cameras. And I think that was kind of like the same time that the video industry was shifting from big agencies to these solopreneur creators who were doing well for themselves.
Yeah. That reminds me of when we lived together and we would watch, I don't remember who this person was, but it was a travel vlogger who would just do like these oversaturated videos of like beautiful resorts and all kinds of interesting places. And it was almost like there was this style of music that encaptured that thing, and now it feels really popular, like every travel vlogger's doing it.
Yeah.
But it was just a vibe. Like, it'd be like a 14-minute video that was just only cool, interesting travel things to be doing.
People jumping off cliffs and
yeah, into water with a GoPro. It was just these really cool shots and cool music. And you would just find yourself watching for 14 minutes being like, oh my gosh, I like love this. I'm sitting here today, a long time later, remembering it.
Yeah.
If I hear that type of music on a video, I'm like, oh, this is like that thing. And it feels like there's so much of that. Like, the technology, the distribution, all those things are very simple now. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. You just gotta like capture it and put it together.
Yeah. No, yeah. You don't need like a production crew or crazy equipment. And there's so many different camps in the video industry. There are people who don't like gimbals. they like handheld shots, or, and I think one of the things is that you always fight against is, or at least I try to, is instead of thinking, what are other videographers or filmmakers going to think of this? What am I creating this video for, whether it's personal or a client? Sometimes clients want that, hypey vibe feel, and that's kind of how I got into it. So it's pretty easy for me to do that, but it's fun. Like my whole workflow, everything is ever evolving. And I think that's what I like so much about it. I can go from 1 week to be like, yeah, I kind of feel like I'm plateauing. And then the next week you feel like, I cannot wait to wake up in the morning and try this new thing that I figured out or I learned. So, yeah.
Yeah. I've seen you work on projects like video for Facebook ads, or people with like a coach or somebody else who needs video for like maybe an online course they're making or things like that. I've seen you do weddings. Like, what are the types of clients you're working with these days? Or is that like too broad of a question?
Yeah, it's a lot of different types. But I would say most of them are businesses.
Yeah.
Most of them provide obviously a product or a service. A lot of pay-per-click campaigns. So a lot of that has to do with, featuring a product or featuring a giveaway. But also, I feel like a lot of the clients that have hired me have been wanting, obviously, to push their service or their product, but they want it in a hypey, vibey way, right? Like, I always would describe it like organic. It doesn't feel corporate.
Yeah.
It's not, it kind of rides the line of like an edge,
Yeah.
And I think businesses want that because, who wants corporate salesy type of stuff?
Yeah, and especially with when you're doing things with social ads, it's very obvious that when things are done almost too perfectly, it performs poorly. It's been, like, photographers see that all the time. It's like very normal. There are clients who get a lot out of you, or you watch them use the videos you create really well. What are the things that they're doing as a collaborator or as a client that are helping to make the whole project and the ROI for them successful?
I think the clients that are doing well, or at least are seeing more ROI from the videos, is letting the creative or the videographer have a lot more freedom. Instead of chaining them to, specific things about how things are shot or how they want it to be shot. Because at the end of the day, right, if you hired a photographer, if you hired a videographer, or if you hired somebody to design your website, but you were like, hey, I want you to design the website, or I want you to make the video, but this is how I want you to make the video. At that point, it's like, why are you hiring them? You're basically then just hiring me to make sure that all the settings are correct, from exposure to, ISO and focus and all that kind of stuff. But you're not taking advantage of what the creative or the, solopreneur has in them.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. It reminds me so much of the people who I've seen the best. I sometimes teach workshops on how to work with, or how to get branding done very affordably. And I walk people through how to work with college students, or like their niece who happens to have a camera but isn't maybe a pro or doesn't have a lot of reps yet. And that's always a big thing, is like, give them direction as far as what you want the outcome to be, but the way in which they do things, let them do it their own way. Because you've sat on big photo shoots, you've like worked on large corporate shoots with a lot of big teams, and you've done some very scrappy shoots, like your wedding, or you helped coordinate the videography for your sister's wedding, your younger sister, Olivia's wedding.
We all shot it on an iPhone.
Yeah, it was like, we had very specific instructions for everybody to use their iPhones, and made sure the settings were on point, and made sure everybody was shooting it in the right way. And you clipped all that together, and it was incredible, right?
Yeah.
It was like awesome.
Yeah.
And
I shouldn't show that to people, really. I shouldn't have that on my website, because it'll show that an iPhone video is actually pretty stellar.
Yeah, it's really good. But it was so cool to have, like, my perspective of that wedding. Like, I noticed some moments that was like, anyways, that was such a cool way of bringing things together. You've worked the gamut of all of those things, and like letting a client be clear about what they want, what their goals are, what they're trying to accomplish, the context, like where is this video going to live, helps to make a lot of decisions that sometimes clients aren't pros with. That's really cool. I just want to talk about your clients a little bit, just as people or as business owners. A lot of business owners listen to this podcast. What are the things that you see as media becomes noisy, as there's a million different channels to be like marketing and distributing through? What are the things that you see your clients ignoring or even maybe the reverse? What do you see them prioritizing with their focus when it comes to getting their brand or their message out there? Like what do you see successful people doing with their work or paying attention to?
Yeah. I think I see them focusing on like a channel that they know works really well for them, not trying to be like everything, and that kind of goes back into like when you hire a creative. Sometimes it's hard to be like, okay, I want you to, be really good at shooting YouTube videos for us, but then I want you to shoot TikToks for us. And, like some things can be done in-house by non-creative or professionals. So like a TikTok, for example, most of the time if a client's like, yeah, we want to shoot, we want to start doing TikToks. I'm like, well, you probably shouldn't hire me for that, because TikTok has a vibe where if it feels overdone, people don't want to watch it, right? They want to see like how it really is. But then they can, shift their focus and their money towards like something like a YouTube or Facebook ads. So I feel like a lot of the clients right now are focusing on specific channels that they know that work for them. And if they don't know what works for them, then that's when you got to kind of test. But once you like find that thing, I feel like then you got to go all in on that.
Yeah. I'll turn that question around just to you, even because you've worked in a lot of different businesses. You've been close to a lot of different founders of different businesses. What do you think for you when it comes to your approach of running your business? What have you seen yourself over time be like, oh, I really need to make sure I pay attention to this sort of thing. Like this needs to be the focus of what I'm doing. And then what are the things that you're like, okay, after I've done this enough times, I've learned to ignore, or like, I don't need to worry about that, or it would be easy to be distracted. Like what are the distractions that you...
For my business?
Yeah, or just for, you and your work.
Yeah, I feel like now learning is something that will always continue to evolve, like how I shoot and everything like that, the technical aspect of it all. But now I feel like, when I start working with a client, now I'm more focused on like how I'm interacting with that client. How can I be as clear and concise with how we start our relationship so that there aren't all these hiccups along the way in regards to communication.
That setting expectations at the beginning of a relationship is really important.
Yeah.
It's a really big deal.
Yeah.
And how do you know when it's done, right? Like setting those expectations is a really big deal too.
Yeah. And I think in the beginning, it's like, it's funny because you don't know what to set expectations for. You might have like a rough idea and then you get halfway through and you're like, shoot, I never mentioned this to the client. Now I'm going to have to go back and explain this, and now it's going to be different. And I think you're always going to have that type of stuff, but I think as time goes on, it'll evolve, it gets better. And I think when you start to become more secure in your work, you're able to have those conversations more confidently, because at the end of the day, if you have set boundaries or expectations of how you want this relationship to go and it doesn't go that way, or they're not wanting to do that, then it's easy to say, then I don't think that we're a good fit. Like I feel like in the beginning of any business, a scarcity mindset is, you struggle with that all the time. You feel like you got to take everything, and to a certain extent you should, because it gives you the ability to just get exposed to all different types of work. But once you get a little bit more secure in that and you feel like you have some security financially, then it allows you to, not be a dick about it, but just set the right expectations so that you and the client have a good relationship with each other. It's not, you both aren't overstepping your bounds.
Yeah. You don't have to be a jerk to have boundaries, and you don't have to be...
No.
Like difficult to work with to have boundaries.
No.
That clear communication and all those things are actually relaxing, but at the beginning of all of it, it feels scary to even start to put up some of those boundaries, or be like, okay, I'm done now, or like more revisions cost. Video is always like such an overwhelming thing to me, because you can just edit it. Like you could literally edit it forever. Justice League just released like a whole like, I don't like this, I want to re-edit it the way that I want it. Like you can like redo it a million times.
Yeah.
And it can be different.
Yeah, and you can go the opposite of that as the creative. You could be, instead of not putting up enough expectations or clear communication from the start, you can be too difficult, like you were saying. Like you can be like, you want one other revision. That like revisions, there's a spectrum to it. Like if somebody was like, I don't like this entire sequence and it needs to be redone, that's way different than, hey, we just don't like this clip. Can you take it out?
Yeah.
And can you replace it with something else? And it's B-roll, like in all reality, like I can do that in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's just like, yeah, I'll do it. Because at the end of the day, that puts a good feeling onto the client. Like they feel good about that. Like, okay, well, like he's not going to nickel and dime me. It's like a lawyer, right? Like you start freezing up and when you're talking to him because you were like, every 5 minutes I'm getting charged, So
yeah. There's so many times as creative, it's difficult to walk that tension, and communicating is such a big deal. What about for you? What are the things that you're like, oh, when I was first starting out in business, I thought this worked or was important, but it actually wasn't. What are some of the things that you're like, oh, now I see those as distractions, but before I thought it was important?
I'm going to say this as I just bought a new camera, but I feel like in the beginning you get so obsessed with like equipment and gear, or just whatever profession you're in, name the expensive things that you can buy as that type of professional. You can get so fixated on, if I just have this, then I'll be better. If I just have, that, like things, instead of just focusing on like the repetitions of working on that craft, And I think the repetition also, coincides with interacting with clients. So I feel like, that's probably something that I realized early on, which was like, I don't need all these things. I need to just make sure that I'm putting in the work, like time, reps.
Yeah. Oh, that's so relatable. I think of that at Studio J, where people rent photo studio from us. You watch people get really excited about the gear that's available to them here. And it is fun to be like, oh, I have new tools to use. But it always comes back to like, as a photographer or a videographer, like, what is your perspective? What's your opinion? How are you working with clients? Are you guiding them through the thing? And you can do that with iPhones or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes more expensive gear makes things even harder, because the more you add to a scenario, let's say like an actual just like studio shoot, it just makes things more difficult, because now you're having to remember like, oh, gotta get this light, gotta get that light, gotta set this up.
Yeah.
And then you're like, this is the first time I've used this monitor. How do I use this monitor? So
and it almost like if it's your money, like if you're a small solopreneur and you're putting money into it, it's also like,
I have to use
that's a $5,000 thing that I'm just like, whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember where we would do photo shoots, there was these moments where Allie's like, I just want natural light. And I'm like, we have like a lot of money of lighting in here to use. So maybe we should use that somehow. And it's like, doesn't matter, getting over that is a really big deal. Tell me about, for you, just personally, like what do you feel like is motivation? Like, what do you feel like motivates you, or what do you feel like draws you into a project? Or when you're like, okay, cool, I'm like, find myself really invested. What are sort of the ingredients of motivation for you?
I think it goes back to what I talked about earlier when I first started, when I was doing it just for myself. That feeling of ecstasy in an edit where you're just like, this is awesome. Like, I get so lost in that, and I still do. And I feel like that, like, obviously when you're growing a business, you're trying to grow financially, and you want to put out good work. But I feel like at the end of the day, it always comes back to when you're in the edit and you're doing that work, you hit a certain amount of flow, where you're just like, I could do this for 48 hours straight right now because it just feels so good. And that might sound weird to some people, but I feel like if everybody could just find that one thing, like for me, it started out totally personal. Like, I've never even thought about doing video for people for actual money. So I guess that's not motivation, but that's what kind of draws me in every time, because I hit certain edits sometimes or certain projects where I'm like, I don't know if I want to like edit this right now.
Yeah.
But as soon as you get into it, that's when you start to feel like, oh, okay, I'm going to keep doing this.
Yeah. I know it's authentic from you. We can go on vacation and you're like, you can do anything you want to do, and you have a camera and you're making a video of some kind, or you're like pulling those things together, experimenting and learning. And it's like, whenever you can see that happening, you've like figured out a way to like professionally do that thing that you also do on vacation when no one cares what you're doing.
And I think also, and that's kind of like why I was shooting on vacation, was you get to a certain point where you're just doing client work all the time. And, no offense to any of my clients if they're listening right now, but a lot of time it's not the exact work that you want to be doing in terms of where you are at that particular time.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's so important to continue to do stuff for yourself personally, so that you can kind of scratch that itch.
Yeah. It's almost like you've figured out a way to practice in the things you're uncomfortable with first on your own, where it's safe, where you can mess up. Or I've been on a boat with you and you flew a drone into a lake. It was like you got to make those mistakes on a personal shoot, and then less likely to do that on a client shoot probably.
Yeah. I just recently almost lost my drone in
a second one.
Crazy wind just a couple of days ago. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that type of stuff is really important, just to be able to continue to hone your craft.
Yeah.
But in a way that you enjoy it. Like this morning when I woke up, like I was so stoked to be able to get that footage in my computer and start editing it,
Yeah.
And I have no idea where it's going to go. I've got a million different ideas. I'm like, should I add in some TikTok vibes of some trends with some of stuff that I want? Do I want to make it like a serious, somber edit? So I feel like if you can find something that is just that's what kind of drives you or motivates you.
Yeah. It's like the project is, you're like discovering what it is about the project versus like dictating to it. I think it's a common theme that I hear from creative people when they're making things. Tell me, I want to talk a little bit about your childhood. This is where the podcast just turns into a trick therapy session. I'm like, I was like, who hurt you?
Yeah.
One, what were you like as a kid? And do you see that present in your work anywhere? Are you like, oh yeah, like little kid Bobby's like showing up at work with me? But so first off, like, what were you like as a kid? If someone's like, tell me about what you were like as a kid, what's your sort of elevator pitch on that?
Yeah. I feel like when I think about my childhood, there's two phases of me, right? So like there was young Bobby, infant to early high school, where I've always been the smallest, but I was out of my friend group, I was the weakest, and I wasn't as athletic as everybody else. I wasn't as good at a certain sport because I grew up playing sports. And then, mid-high school was when I kind of flipped the switch, and from a athletic physicality standpoint, kind of took things more seriously. But I feel like, looking at it from, 10,000 feet, I was an athlete, but like most athletes, you got compartmentalized as an athlete. So I never really explored anything else besides sports.
Yeah.
And that was something as a kid you don't think like, oh, I wish I would have been able to try a different thing, But looking back on it now, you're like, yeah, I feel like, from a creative standpoint, it was always there. I always did little things, but it was always by myself or with one of my sisters. But it was never anything that I would ever bring up to my friends, because with my friends, it was like, let's play baseball, let's play football, let's play basketball. And I played golf pretty competitively too. So there was a big chunk of my life where, I was just a golfer. And I've talked about this before. I went to college, got recruited to play golf, but probably like mid-high school, I hated golf. I was done with it. But it was one of those things where I was like, well, I'm pretty good at it. I feel like it's something that I need to repay back to my parents because they invested so much into me with golf. And that's kind of what kind of led me to go down that path, even though I probably didn't really want to.
Like, yeah, on like a day-to-day, it wasn't interesting to you?
No, like I just always remember, especially in college, I remember my coach always harping on me because I never practiced.
Yeah.
I always wanted to like just go to the gym and work out or something like that, or hang out with friends.
Yeah.
And
it's so funny because now like the creative, you spend time, like I get to spend more time with you even outside of work, where I'm like, you're like a creative person, very similar to like your other two siblings are creative in their own, in very different ways. And it's like very easy to see the similarities of, you're like, oh yeah, like I enjoy creating this and I like making stuff. And if I have nothing to do, I'm like making something, right?
Yeah.
Like, and
I never made anything
when
I was younger.
Yeah. And it's like, and you've watched sort of that thing of those like athlete first and creative second. I very much was that way. I like never thought I was like doing anything creative. It was just sports all the time. And then you see, you've got to work in your previous careers, you've gotten to work with people who are like creative their whole life, and then they discover like, oh, they like working out, or they like rock climbing, or they like playing a sport that they've never would have touched before, you know? And you're like, you have fun doing this.
Yeah.
we like play cornhole, and your sister's like, this is really fun. It's like, I'm kind of competitive.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I want to get good at this.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, artist kid,
Yeah.
you know?
It's like in the genes. It's like you still got it in you, but it's just inverse, you know.
Yeah.
Like she's now maybe just experiencing that feeling of competitiveness.
Yeah.
Whereas what I'm doing now is different. You know, like before it was always like, I want to be better than you. I'm going to be better than you.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to work so that I'm better than that person, or so that I can beat that person. But now it's different because everyone has their own different style. Like you can't beat somebody at their own game, you know? Like if somebody has a certain style about how they go about editing a video, it's like, I'm never going to beat you at what you're good at, you know? Now, there are times when I'm like, man, I want to get that good. Yeah, 100%. But I feel like I'm taking more inspiration than I am looking at other people as like, I'm going to beat you.
Yeah. There's like,
I don't even know how you could beat somebody, you know?
I don't know what the competition is.
We're going to post this video at the exact same time on Instagram. Whoever gets the most likes wins.
It's funny. It's like so ludicrous when you lay out what that is, but that is, we all play this dumb game with ourselves where we like compete based on, I don't know what. It's like we're running a race, like, but we're not even on the same tracks and we're not timing it, but we're just like, we think we're winning or something.
Yeah.
It's like little kids who are making up scores in their head. Yeah. But it's not accurate or in line with any reality.
I just found somebody here in the Columbus area, a videographer, and if you want to talk about like gauging popularity or who's winning, like he had a lot fewer followers than I did, but I would say his work is better than mine in some ways, you know? So I followed him and I was like, that's sweet. Like, how is this guy not blowing up right now?
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. So. No, that's really cool. We're going to get into the important questions. I feel like that was kind of like the warm up. But this is the important question. We asked everybody this. This is the whole point of everything that we're doing. So give me a rundown of 3 to 5 of your favorite songs that come from the 2000s, the years 2000, 2009.
So I'll preface this. Music, oddly enough, has never been like a crazy important thing in my life. Like I feel like I've always shied away from telling people what my favorite music is because I feel like they'll be like, that's so mainstream. Now I don't really care. Music is really important to me when it comes to video editing. Yeah. And how, like, basically how it makes you feel. Yeah. I feel like it's made me feel music more than I have in the past. But to go into your question about 2000 to 2009, these aren't necessarily my favorite. These are the ones that stand out in my head. Yeah. So the first one is My Humps. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because
classic song.
Classic, yeah. It's the first song I ever called into a radio station and asked for them to play it.
Please play My Humps.
Please play My Humps. And I did it really just because I think I was around like a couple girls and I wanted to impress them. Like, I'll call that in. Yeah. Second one.
That yeah. For sure. I can't imagine that didn't work. That's like a guaranteed. Yeah. I wish I had like I need to like look this up.
We were both being babysat, if that tells you anything.
You were being babysat, and you call in, and you're like, "Please play My Humps." There's some girls around, and you know, you understand.
The second one is "Ride with Me" by Nelly. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's an amazing classic, but also that has a story because me and my neighborhood friend, we created a dance sequence to that. That was during a time when he wanted to make like a dance group. Yeah. So we would like go into his basement, practice. Yeah. We'd wear Band-Aids on our cheeks, just like Nelly.
It's a pretty chill song. That's like it's a relaxing vibe. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah. The next one is Party Up in Here. Mm-hmm. That was actually like one of the first rap songs that I ever heard. Yeah. And I was pretty young. I went over to one of my friend's house and their parents were gone and one of his older sisters was blasting it in their house, like blast. Like it felt like my chest was, it probably wasn't, but it felt like my chest was going to explode. It was so loud. But at the time I thought that the lyrics were humping here, humping here.
Instead of
and
I
just remember thinking, my mom would be so mad if she heard me listening to this song right now. But I was like, I felt cool, you know. I was like, yeah, I can be around this.
She probably would have been mad even if because there's other lyrics besides just those misunderstood ones.
For sure, yeah.
And you weren't like, it's not like you were like 32 at the time.
No, yeah.
Like some of these songs, I always think for me, there's a lot of the songs that are, it's like these things you're like, I'm not supposed to be listening. Like there's something in this that I'm like, I shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
It's like when I don't know how old you were, but like when you're like 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, when you're doing stuff that you're like, I like this, but I shouldn't be.
Yeah.
You're like, that's unforgettable.
Yeah.
That feeling is like, will never not be awesome.
It's a sense of like out of control.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't control this, but I guess I'll just go with it. The next one would be from Limp Bizkit. It's called Rollin'.
Limp Bizkit.
So that one, me and my friends would go down to his basement and we would play that song and we would just ninja roll every time. He would say, rollin', 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 rollin'. So we literally took that song very literal and just went with it.
That's amazing. You had like an embodied, it was like an interpretive dance of activity.
Yeah, I feel like yeah. And then I guess the last one would be In the Club.
I wonder if Mr. Limp Bizkit walks around and is like, I bet there's some kiddos just like doing ninja rolls listening to this.
You know, I can't picture him like very specifically, but if I were to picture him, I would think that he would be on like one of those motorcycle discovery shows.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I think I'm mixing two people up, but when I think of Limp Bizkit, I think
But it's the brand. It's a correct brand.
Yeah. He's like...
That's incredible. It makes me want to go listen to all of those songs, and I appreciate them differently now. All right, so here's last question. A future videographer is listening to this, someone who's going to do whatever you're doing now. They don't have experience. They're just ideas. They're just interested in it. What is first bits of advice that you would pass along to them?
Just got to do it. Like, you just got to make stuff. You got to take whatever. I mean, right now, like, this would be the perfect time to be somebody who wants to get into video, especially if you have, like, an iPhone. I mean, you could make, like, I follow some guys who make full-length feature films on their iPhones, right? Or they're like getting sponsored by American Express to make iPhone videos, or Apple's hiring them to make iPhone videos. So I feel like now, I mean, there's not as big of a barrier to entry, and you can edit stuff on your phone, which is crazy. You know, I started off in iMovie, so I feel like you just gotta start creating something, even if you don't post it. Like, that's the biggest thing. I feel like now people won't start things, or they won't create videos because they feel like if they create a video, they have to post it. But I don't feel like you don't need to post it. I mean, you just gotta see if you like it first. Get a taste of that feeling of when you create an edit that you really like.
Yeah.
Don't post it and just keep doing it over and over again until you're like, yeah, I want to post it. But if your fear is judgment, instead of like going the route of people saying like, who cares what everybody thinks? Because at the end of the day, if you do care, you will care. Just create and sit on it. You know, you don't have to. Like, I have so many videos that I haven't posted or won't post.
Yeah.
You know.
It's so interesting to you say that, because it is so, I probably have given the advice of like, just publish as an exercise of just publishing, which I understand like the point of that. But there is something too, and I have myself done a lot of things that'll sit in the archives for a very long time. And every great creator does that. If you look at any of the artists anyone that we look up to, they have a whole catalog of things that were never released and will never be released, or their ideas in a notebook that's, you know, or just like sometimes after people die, those things only come out because they're like, it's interesting at that point, but it's not.
And sometimes it's like the greatest stuff they've done, you know, but at that time they didn't really want to post it, or they didn't want to publish it or release it. You know? And I feel like if you start getting into the habit of creating something just to post it, especially in today's day and age, what you're basically saying is you want to create stuff so you could post it, so you can get likes, so you can feel that dopamine hit of, man, people like my stuff, you know. Because at the end of the day, no matter how, you know, zen you are, you feel that. You're like, wow, people love this. I'm so awesome right now, you know. So I feel like even creating stuff and not posting it is pretty powerful, just because you're basically proving to yourself that you like doing this, even if nobody ever was watching you do it.
Like the public doesn't. It's like you don't need the opinion. It doesn't matter. Like what you think about your own work and like your own activity matters. And for some people, they just need to do the reps on that. I think that's really interesting. What would be something, if you were going to go back to yourself as you were like getting started or getting into it, what was some advice that like maybe people would give you, or people try to steer you in a particular direction? It just didn't like feel like it was right for you? Or what would you say, like, there's a lot of advice that people just need to ignore?
I feel like, especially in the creative industry and maybe even more in video, there's a lot of voices that will tell you what is professional and what is not, quote unquote. Like I said, gimbals, for example. Like you could go on YouTube and you could find a lot of like filmmakers who are like, gimbals are like, you're cheating, you know, or, you know, it's not true to film, you know? And I just think that's BS, because if it's a good shot, it's a good shot. So I feel like not necessarily people were telling me, but if you immerse yourself in industry long enough, you start to get the sentiment of what people feel about certain things, and that can steer you away from doing something that you actually want to do. Let's say using a gimbal or making vibey, hypey videos that filmmakers would say that's like everyone's doing that. But if that makes you happy and you like doing that, then you should do that. Especially in your personal stuff. When you start getting into the client work, you're bringing your own style, but you want to make sure that they're happy. So you'll have plenty of time to, you know, do things that aren't necessarily the most exciting to you.
Right.
But when you first start out and you start creating stuff on your own, I mean, who cares? Like if you're using a gimbal or if you're not using a gimbal. Like when I first started, I only used a gimbal. Like it was like, what? I'm not going to shoot a video without my footage being completely stabilized.
Yeah.
You know, but now I'm getting into not using it as much. But it's not like I think the gimbal is bad.
Right. Yeah. And what does it mean to be a professional is like a funny thing, right? Of like, even from the clothes you go show up to at a meeting, right? You know those things don't matter, but it like there's this story where you're like, I think if I wear a blue shirt and a tie, like then it's like button up that like looks like, and maybe like a Patagonia vest with my like startup's logo on it, then I'm like,
I've raised.
Then I like am more professional, right? And it's people don't care, or like the clients who matter don't care, I would say.
Yeah, and on the flip side of it, I would say, you know, you always will think people care more than they do. People are too wrapped up in what they're doing, and how they feel like what you think about what they're doing, for them to even really. It's not like they're sitting down and be like, I can tell Bobby used a gimbal that entire video. Like, man.
Oh my gosh, that's the truth. There's so many times you go work with clients who are very impressive. Like we go talk to these people who have accomplished a lot, they're successful, and they want you to think that they're creative. They hired you to do creative, and they're like, they want affirmation from you as a client, you know, or you're the vendor for them.
Yeah, I feel like I've actually entered into so many different client relationships with different business owners where I've been intimidated going into talking to them. Yeah. And then you realize, oh, like they're stressed out about something and they're looking for you to comfort them about, you know, well, can we make this happen? You know, and you're like, oh, like this is actually a role reversal, but it always was like that. I just in my own head made myself think that once I entered the room and started talking to them, they'd be like, yeah, he's not legit. Truth, because with me getting into video in such a weird way and not a very professional way, there was a long time, and I still deal with it, where you're like, well, I mean, they've got to know I'm not a true videographer or a true filmmaker. Right. I don't have the look of like, quote unquote, of like a creative, right? Like in my brain, I'm like, should I start buying some cool glasses so I can go in and, you know, will I look more creative, you know? Yeah. So. You know, like plastic, sort of like clear or like orange circular frames. Yeah. 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 And you're like, but then you're like. Don't have to be a fake thing. Everyone just cares about what the video will look like, you know? And I think, you know, breaking down barriers about what certain professionals are or are not is important.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's probably you and I's thesis of our career journey is not being classically trained in the things that we're doing.
No.
That's cool. I appreciate you being on. Is there anything, if people are going to go pay attention to you out in the world, is there anywhere where they could like learn more about you? If they wanted to like hire you for a video, if they wanted to pay attention, where would you tell people to look?
I mean, I post a lot of my videos on my Instagram, which is just Bobby Jocson, Jocson.
Yeah.
_ But I would say if you really want to look at something, scroll like way down, because I haven't taken any of my videos off of my Instagram.
Yeah.
I've kept all of my first starting out videos,
Yeah.
and you'll be able to find some ones where you're like, woo! But at the time, I posted it, I was like, this is awesome, But I like having that in there as like a reminder of like
The progression.
wow, look at that. Yeah.
You're not cleaning up your old feed.
No.
Yeah.
No.
That's cool. Thanks for being on, Bobby. Appreciate it. Thanks for listening to the Gem Club podcast. You can check out thegemclub.com for information about our membership, about other past podcast guests and ones to come. And you can also like and subscribe. I encourage everyone who's listening to this to go to their phone, subscribe to the podcast, and then if they're in a room with other people, or if you're even in a public space, maybe like a coffee shop as the world opens back up, go, like if someone goes to the restroom, go get on their equipment and get on their Spotify, open their phone or computer, get on their stuff, invade their privacy, and subscribe them to the podcast as well. It would mean a lot to me if you would break down those walls and divisions in the world and help us out. Peace.